We've been doing this a long time, haven't we? You hold a twisted metal, I kill and destroy for you. I make a wish, you continue to sit on your throne, surrounded by your guards and women. I think you've had enough fun for a while.
Hello and welcome to ranking every Twisted Metal ending from worst to best. I've wanted to do this video for a long time, but I was intimidated by the idea because of the sheer amount of effort it would take. There are well over 100 endings throughout the entire series, and with this video, I'll rank them all. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what your favorite ending is in the comments below. And please, be sure to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this content. It goes such a long way in supporting this channel and the content I make here, and it means a ton to me. Without further ado, let's just get into it. First though, a small disclaimer. For the most part, the ranking is pretty straightforward, but I had to make some weird decisions when it came to the endings from the first Twisted Metal game, because I wanted to include the live-action endings that were cut from the final release. If the text-based ending is essentially the same as the live-action version, I'll just use the live-action version. But if there's a major difference between the two versions, I'll consider them as separate entries. Okay, with that, let's begin. So in Twisted Metal 4, there are by far the most playable vehicles in the entire series, which is a wonderful feature for the gameplay and extending the replay value even further to experiment with all the different metal twisting machines. But unfortunately, every vehicle outside of the starting roster lacks any driver information and therefore also any story or unique endings. There are 14 main roster vehicles who have an actual driver behind their wheels, and an additional 9 vehicles that are unlocked by either completing the tournament mode once or inputting a code like a no-good cheater. On top of that are custom create-a-car vehicles whose combinations can reach numbers well beyond my ability to count, like a few dozen or so. Each of those boss vehicles and create-a-cars will show the same generic ending, so by default those are the worst endings, because there's nothing to them. For the same reason that the previous entry is the worst, I submit that Minion be right there with them. Minion does not have an ending. The game will just immediately cut to the credits when you beat the game using him. The only reason he is put above the TM4 characters is that his loading screens at least imply some bit of story, no matter how little it actually is. You might argue that using the loading screen dialogue is an unfair thing to include in the analysis of these endings, but this is my list, and I would say that the ending movies are just punchlines, and everything that leads up to one to make the punchline even harder or more impactful is fair game. So for that reason, Minion gets second to last. Okay, now on to the endings with actual content. Not that the content is in any way good or worthwhile, but it does mean the worst true ending of Twisted Metal is Thumper from TM3, which is a game that will no doubt be featured quite a lot in the early parts of this list. Even those who are sympathetic to TM3, who speak its truth and greatness to the world, can't deny that these endings are mostly abysmal and are only valuable in so much as they are meme-worthy. Thumper is no such ending. On its surface, it isn't clever or interesting. Bruce returns for his last appearance in the series, if you don't count Twisted Metal Small Brawl, and his wish is for the ability to hang with his homies, something that most people wouldn't enter into a vehicular nightmare contest for, which is a bit of a theme with these Twisted Metal 3 endings, that the winners ask for something mundane or normal, despite being presented with the option of wishing for literally anything else. What I'm trying to say is that on the surface, it's dumb. But beyond that, it can easily be interpreted to mean something that's a little less innocent. I'll let you be the judge as to why. If you were to watch this ending on its own, separating it from the rest of the series, it's not that bad. It's not earth-shattering in its cleverness, but it's certainly a play on his words that isn't total nonsense. Axel competes in the Twisted Metal tournament once again so that he could become one complete machine. No longer should he settle for being a simple man sandwiched between two massive wheels like a flesh Oreo. Nay, following his victory, he demands that he be fully merged with metal, grease, and gears. Man-made machine. This gets twisted into him being turned into a clock. Not a bad twist. Doesn't feel forced. Well done, game. So why is it so far down in the list? It's because this game doesn't exist on its own. It exists in a world that has Twisted Metal 2, and art is meant to be examined not only on its own terms, but by the context it's created within. In the previous game, his wish is to break free of them, and by extension, break free of his abuser's control over him. So for Axel to just pop up in the next game as if it's no big deal to climb aboard the war wheels once again, and ask Calypso to help him abandon his humanity and become all wheels all the time, it's a slap in the face. Bad ending. Continuing our opening salvo against Twisted Metal 3, we encounter the sibling cop duo of Jamie and Carl Roberts, who's named Buzz for some reason, who remain the closest thing this series has to continuity between games. They enter the next stage of their story by joining forces after the events of Twisted Metal 2, which we'll discuss further down the list. This is another ending that seems to acknowledge that things happened in Twisted Metal 2, but couldn't be bothered to find out what those things were. They confront Calypso and ask him to transform the world they just spent the entire tournament destroying into a paradise free of crime and war and violence. Calypso abides, and with the flash of magic lightning, the outlaw duo got their wish. The catch is that they, as police officers, are now out of a job and are begging for donuts on the street, as if they couldn't just find new jobs within the utopia they just created. So dumb. Yeah, let's just keep rolling with TM3, I guess, by examining what horrors were done to David Jaffe's avatar.
Sweet Tooth is, like I've said, Sweet Tooth is me. Sweet Tooth is the darkest, most animalistic side of me, and you guys are turning him into a joke.
Sweet Tooth is often considered by Jaffe to be the most potent representation of himself that he has ever created. Sweet Tooth is him. He is Sweet Tooth, and 99 Studios turned him into a
joke.
Sweet Tooth takes the form of a weirdo dressed as a clown, rather than a literal clown that he was in TM2.
Gather round, kiddies, and let me show you just how sweet I can be!
He fancies himself a lover of candy and ice cream, and decides that his reward for slaying dozens of competitors throughout the contest should be the ability to eat as much as he wants. Too bad that doesn't mean there aren't consequences, and his gorging on sweet treats leads him straight into the dentist's chair, where he is presumably torn apart by their many blades and pokey tools. This ending feels a bit forced and nonsensical, as Sweet Tooth wishing to eat all the ice cream and candy he wants should mean that there is nothing stopping him from doing just that. Not a dentist, not himself, not anything. But it does serve as a nice PSA reminding kids to brush their teeth, so I guess it gets points for that. Leaving Twisted Metal 3 for now, we join its sequel once again, to take a look at the first time a real-world human was featured on a Twisted Metal roster, and that cameo could not have been more fitting for the series, because they went with Rob Zombie, whose music has since become inseparable from these games, and is easily one of the best contributions 989 Studios ever made to the franchise. It's that or Pizza Boy, I'll let you be the judge. His ending is not great. Mr. Zombie is presented as a silent Rob Zombie politely sitting in the back of the room, while the disembodied head, who is also Rob Zombie, has this verbal duel with Melvin where they finish each other's sentences. Sexual tension aside, it eventually leads into a short clip from Rob Zombie's Super Beast music video. The ending just feels like an excuse to shove even more Rob Zombie music into the game, which isn't a bad thing, but when it comes to rating these endings, it doesn't really do much for me. This one is shoved down towards the bottom of the list for the same reason that Thumpers was from this game. It's a wish that didn't necessarily require the murder of dozens of contestants. All Club Kid wants is to party all night long, because it's better to burn out in a blaze of horny than to fade away. Calypso twists his wish by granting him a non-stop, all-night party in the frozen hellscape of Alaska, where the nights are 19 hours long or whatever, and he ends up freezing to death, despite the boogie fever raging within. It's a coherent twist, but not a clever one. The wish was dumb to begin with, and no punchline can save that. Much like Thumper and Club Kid, this is another wish that is mundane and shouldn't need a trickster god in his vehicular murder contest to make happen. Firestarter is a man obsessed with pyrotechnics and flames. If something goes boom, so does he. In his pants. So what does a man addicted to the taste of Inferno wish for? Fireballs on command, the power of the sun in the palm of his hand, a really fancy lighter? No, he just wants to have a nice barbecue with all of his friends. Calypso can't let a good wish go unpunished and adds Firestarter to the menu. It's nonsense. This one in particular irks me. It doesn't suffer from the same issue as the other Twisted Metal 3 endings that we talked about already. This wish actually does need supernatural, magical power to be brought about, but it just makes no sense. In the character selection screen, Augur's bio tells a tale of a man who has spent his whole life building this world up with his own two hands, only to see it crumble before him at the hands of the Twisted Metal tournament. So he enters in hopes to bring it all down and restore this world to proper form. And so when he wins, does he wish for any of that? No. He wishes to let the world see his inner child, which is an insane request to make in any situation. Either old Buster Cobb is playing 5D chess, or the constant flipping over of Twisted Metal 3 has left him with so many concussions that even his hard hat couldn't keep his brain from turning into soup. I don't feel like I'm equipped to tackle this one or speak about it in any meaningful way. I'll just evaluate it on a purely objective level and just say that I don't know what the fuck is going on. There are some mumbles and grumbles from Petunia, and then they appear on a stage with their dreams achieved. Yeah, good for them, I guess. But this ending is a nothing burger that may or may not be fucked up towards a certain group of people that I, again, have no interest in making that call. Some of you may be wondering why this has somehow escaped the bottom tier of endings. Despite being basically nothing at all, I would agree that on its own, it doesn't really deserve to be held above any ending, let alone as many as it has. But there are a few things that I want to point out that make it more appealing. Black, the driver of manslaughter, is depicted as a gimp-suit demon who has been sent by an unknown person to destroy Calypso. He reveals throughout each loading screen that he was purpose-built by this mysterious handler to do only 3 things: eat, shit, and kill. This is not the first time the series has seen a demon named Black, as one has appeared in Twisted Metal 1, where Darkseid's driver, who is the literal devil, Mr. Ash, reclaims Black from Calypso, who stole them. So it stands to reason that Mr. Ash could be sending Black out again to take out Calypso. I enjoy the ending more for what it implies as a larger story than for what it is on its own. Plus, the note that Calypso leaves for Black is pretty great, and is likely the only bit of levity in the entire game. Twisted Metal Black is set in a world that is completely overwhelmed and suffocated by darkness. So it's nice to see Calypso tell a leather-suited kink monster to screw themselves. It lightens the mood. This one is a bit lame, but not really objectionable in any way. It's one of the text endings from Twisted Metal 1 that got radically changed from the live-action version. This is the lesser version of the two in my opinion. Dave and Mike spent the whole night shredding the competition in their monster truck and want some new tires, which they claim aren't cheap, which is probably true. They get their new treads and mosey on out with no drama. Good for them, I guess. It's just not interesting. Speaking of bland text endings that have a live-action version that is better, in my opinion, there's also Pit Viper's official ending. Angela Fortin, the driver of the snake-clad buggy, asks for $1 million from Calypso, but it turns out to be a ruse as she was hired by the people of LA to get close to him. She opens fire, ends him, and takes the money. No drama, no intrigue, nothing. It is a neat twist that Angela was actually a hired gun by the name of Agent Amanda X, but outside of that, it's a big yawn. I'll admit I am biased against the text endings, especially compared to their cut live-action counterparts, but this one just has nothing worthwhile to talk about. Marcus Kane, the driver of Roadkill, is one of the most interesting characters in all of Twisted Metal, whose appearances often offer the most intrigue and food for thought. He is responsible for the most mind-fucking story beats and lore this series has ever had. It's not uncommon to leave an encounter with Marcus Kane with more questions than answers. However, when it comes to TM3, he's just a weirdo who wants to fuck off into the woods. He's convinced himself that entering the Twisted Metal tournament is just for pride, because some aliens told him he could. Calypso did the only thing that a reasonable person would have done, and that's put him in a mental asylum so that he may receive the proper care and attention that a loony boy like him needs. The ending is still terrible though, especially for not coming close to living up to the other versions of Marcus throughout the series. I don't have much to say about this one. It's just a man from LA who's tired of his community facing hardships and enduring the destruction that Twisted Metal causes. So he enters himself to try to carve out a better life for himself and the people around him. It's a noble goal. If only the ending was performed in a way that was even halfway decent. The acting is so poor, and not even in a fun way. It's just boring.
Cross me again, it's over.
Thank you, man.
The live-action version sees him trying to save his girlfriend, along with taking down the man he sees as responsible for the adversity that he sees. It's fine, there's just really nothing to say about it.
That was anticlimactic.
Oh my god.
This one is really a shame for a couple of reasons. For one, it's surprising how Axel, who is among the most iconic and memorable characters in the entire franchise, just can't seem to get an ending or story that's even halfway decent. I get it that trying to come up with a compelling narrative for a monster man trapped between two massive wheels is probably not the easiest thing to do, but it's not impossible. They did it for Twisted Metal 2, which we'll talk about later. The other reason is that the setup for the story they came up with for him in Twisted Metal Black is not a bad one. It fits the bleak world of the game really well. Axel was walking the park with his wife, the love of his life. He glanced down at the newspaper he was reading, and before he even looked back up, she was gone. He had no idea what happened to her. She vanished with the wind. Over the following months, Axel would receive pieces of her through the mail, along with taunting messages from the person who took her from him. It's a haunting, painfully dark setup for a horror short story, but the payoff is just underwhelming. He enters the tournament to get revenge on the person who took his wife's life. When he wins, he has her killer brought to him, bound in chains. It's Sweet Tooth. Go figure. Mr. Tooth taunts Axel further, saying that his wife begged for him as she was killed. Axel shoots Sweet Tooth, but finds that avenging his wife doesn't take the pain away, and it certainly doesn't bring her back. Axel hops back into his machine and continues to drag his feet across hot asphalt as a way to pay this perceived penance for letting his wife be taken from him. All of the pieces are there for a great horror short story. It just doesn't pay off in any satisfying way. Nothing has changed about him or his situation. It's just a big pile of nothing. This one is fun because it, to me, shows pretty clearly how much Incog Inc., the developers of Twisted Metal Black and Head On, wanted to send a message that they were making the true Twisted Metal 3, and the one that 989 Studios put together back in 1998 was just an imposter and a stain on the good Twisted Metal name. What I mean by that is throughout Head On, there are a ton of things that appeared in Twisted Metal 3 that really seems like Incog decided they wanted to bring back, but do better. For instance, the opening movie apes a lot of what TM3 did in terms of using cel-shaded animation to show off the kind of high-octane, exciting action you can see in the game. There's the use of Egypt and Tokyo throughout the tournament, along with the complete dismissal of every ending in Twisted Metal 3, in favor of continuing the stories for many of those characters in their own way. Mr. Slam is no exception to Head On's goal of making the true Twisted Metal 3, because his story features the exact same punchline as Augur, where the construction guy is turned into a useless baby. The difference is that this time it doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. Following the events of TM2, Simon Whittlebone, the driver of Mr. Slam, has become a ghost and enters the tournament to regain his human form, so that he can protect his life's work, which is a giant fuck-off tower that he built. Calypso grants the wish and Simon is reborn, as an infant, where he'll have to wait until he's old enough to fight off any would-be tower attackers. Like many of the endings in Head On, it's solid and hard to find fault in, but it's also hard to find much to get excited about. My ranking is not based on what is objectively best or good or whatever, it's on how interesting or enjoyable the ending actually is. The worst thing something can be is mediocre. At least something on the extreme end of bad is still often entertaining, even if it's not for the reasons that were intended. And outside of it clearly being the developers just trying to dunk on TM3, there's not much to it. And here we are, back to the doldrums of Twisted Metal 4 endings, which, if I'm being honest, are on the whole a pretty enormous improvement on TM3, which is not an especially high bar to clear, but one that 989 Studios did indeed clear. This one sees Warthog take a drastically different form than he has in other games. Much more cartoony and silly. He's a caricature of a military man piloting this World War I tank, and his wish is to be placed in command of an army that has no weakness and no equal. Sweet Tooth twists this so General Warthog is the small toy soldier being pushed around a sandbox by a child. It's a bit of a non sequitur in that his wish or wording weren't contorted in some clever way to lead to him looking like a fool. It just wasn't granted in the way he asked at all.
The general wants the most powerful army ever amassed in the history of war!
It's like if you go to the bar and ask for a traditional martini and the bartender just punches you in the face. It isn't witty, he's just being an asshole. However, it's still fun to see Warthog perform this weird pelvic thrust throughout the entire ending, so that's mostly why he made it out of the bottom tier. There's definitely meme potential, but even that can't make this into a good ending. The hardest thing about these bottom tier endings is that I don't have much to say about them, especially some of these TM4 endings because these characters are barely anything. Oftentimes they are just one dimension that consists entirely of what occupation they have. Their whole identity is literally just a thing they do, and Trashman is that to a T. He's just a big cartoon dumb guy who likes trash, and he wants the world to be trash because of how much he likes trash. There's nothing to talk about because there's nothing to it. The only thing that saves this from being at the complete bottom is that John St. John's performance of Daddy DeVito is excellent and does all the heavy lifting for an otherwise unremarkable ending movie.
They wish for plate of trash, whole world of garbage. Yes, they wish this whole big world to be garbage.
Back to TM3 for this one, and we begin one of a few endings that references some movie or pop culture thing. This ending is fun. It's dumb as hell, but it's fun. Amber Rose is a shallow hippie stereotype who wants to solve all the world's problems by planting the seeds of peace and watch them sprout into the flowers of a better future for all. A noble goal, one that she forgets completely when she wins the tournament. She faces Calypso to claim her prize, and because all she remembered was that flower part, she wishes for the world to be covered in flowers, and Calypso grants it by way of spawning these giant flesh-eating fuck-off plants that remind me of the Little Shop of Horrors plant. This ending is not good by any objective measure, but it's fun. And fun is all that matters when quality is nowhere to be found. This is yet another example of Twisted Metal 3 having some awareness that events took place in the previous game, but struggling to come up with how to continue the story. And I don't even blame the developers for that. Trying to continue any of the TM2 endings is like trying to write a sequel to a Knock Knock joke. There isn't much to draw from, and the welcome is well past worn. Warthog rumbles in with his Humvee and demands that he be given the head of a 20-year-old. Calypso turns him into a Futurama head in a jar, years before Futurama was even a thing. So props to him for coming to that idea before one of the greatest animated comedies ever even existed. Aside from that, it's a weak punchline to an even weaker setup. This is another ending that Head-On used to connect itself to TM2. Where an iconic vehicle returns in a direct continuation of their story from that game. This one sees Miranda Watts retracing the steps of Twister's original driver, her sister Amanda Watts. And that led her to enter the Twisted Metal tournament and find out that her sister had won the same one years ago, and events therein led to her demise. Miranda demands that Calypso bring her sister back to her alive right then and there. With the wave of Calypso's hands, the earth splits beneath them, and out comes the zombified husk of Amanda Watts, who is delighted to see her sister again, but Miranda does not return the sentiment. The ending is by no means bad, just forgettable and largely uninteresting. I think more than any other ending from Head-On, this one gets the most overlooked and forgotten. It is a sensible way to continue the story of Twister, but the story didn't exactly need to be continued. I'm lumping these two together because they are basically the same. Warthog and Crimson Fury are both vying for the same prize in Twisted Metal 1, a black box from a downed aircraft that could prove to the world that aliens exist. Warthog is working for the US government to get his hands on it so that they can hide it from the public, while Crimson Fury is attempting to share it with everyone so the truth is out there. Which one you like more is, I guess, more about which side of that debate you're on, as far as how much responsibility does the government have to inform its citizens on something as massive as aliens existing. Crimson Fury believes that it's the people's right to know what happened to that downed airliner, that it was otherworldly beings. The truth must get out, no matter how dangerous it may be. While Warthog believes that it's the government's responsibility to protect people from truth that could harm them or cause distress or panic. And for me, I believe that in a democratic republic society where people's voices decide the seats of power, it's the government's obligation to inform the people so their vote can reflect their wishes. If aliens do exist, we have a right to elect people into power who will deal with that the way we want them to. But if we never know about it, those in power can't possibly know what the will of the people actually is. So for that reason, I do like Crimson Fury's version more. But both are decent endings. The implication of aliens existing is a plot thread that never gets explored again in the series, and I would argue that it probably should have. It's actually interesting. I would have liked to see what the results of their decisions are. What happened after Warthog brought it back to the government? Did people find out anyway? And what happened when Crimson Fury showed the black box to the world? Did no one believe him? That's why I kept this so low in the ranking. It would have been interesting to see it play out instead of just being the setup to a better story. We already talked a little bit about the text ending for Pit Viper because it differs from the live-action version that was cut from the game. I do feel like this is the better of the two, and not just because there is no reading involved. In the text ending, Agent Amanda X reveals herself as not just a woman looking for a payday, but that she was trying to get close enough to Calypso to take him out, and she is successful in doing so. In the live-action ending, she opens fire on Calypso and wipes out most of his guards while Calypso dives out of the way. She loses track of him, and when the smoke clears, he appears in her passenger seat and gets the better of her. It has more drama and tension than the text ending, where she just drives off into the LA night unscathed. The live-action version is just more interesting and has more twists and turns and action. And plus, the acting from Calypso's armed guards is hilarious as they get blasted by Pit Viper. Yeah, decent ending. Warthog throughout the series has a storied history, full of wildly different characters with different motivations. Sometimes they're just this grouchy old fart bragging about all the wars they fought.
I'm a warrior, a survivor. I've fought on battlefields all over the world.
Sometimes they're a rage monster seeking a way to stop feeling remorse for their horrific actions. And sometimes they're just some military fella who bleeds red, white, and blue, who wants nothing more than to remove the world's worst criminals and ne'er-do-wells via magic gun on behalf of the US Army. And that's what we see in Head On with Colonel Hall. This ending sees him demand from Calypso a weapon powerful enough to remove the scum off the Earth's surface. Calypso offers a dinky pistol that Hall rejects in favor of a more futuristic-looking weapon. He immediately takes it and runs headfirst into some drug compound and starts blasting. It's absurd. He takes out all the adults that he assumed were doing unsavory things, only to be killed by the teenagers that he spared, who were reasonably threatened by the insane US Army dude destroying everything around them. I don't understand why Colonel Hall asked for a gun. Like, why didn't he just ask for there not to be any bad guys anymore? Is this supposed to be some sort of commentary that the military doesn't want to solve problems, they just want to create more violence? Or is it just stupid? Yes. I've always enjoyed Spectre and its drivers for sticking to a consistent theme or narrative. More than almost any other character in the series, Spectre has held to the same traits and features in every game. They always roll into the tournament with a kick-ass sports car using a white and blue color scheme, with someone behind the wheel who is obsessed with themselves, with fame, and with fortune. In his Twisted Metal 3 ending, Spectre is a man who wants to be known by everyone and be on TV all the time. It's a weird way to word the wish if you want to be famous, but that's also a theme for Twisted Metal 3 and its movies. It's like when coming up with all the endings, they arrived at the punchline first and then worked out some weird way to get there. The ending doesn't account for his wanting to be famous, but I guess now at least he can be some rare curiosity that gets covered by the local news or something. Not exactly world famous, but he is more noteworthy than he was before, so good for him. However, his ending is not. This is terrible. Another movie reference, this time the classic 80s movie RoboCop. Quattro is an intergalactic space cop, and he's badass. One of the coolest characters in all of Twisted Metal 4. After winning the tournament, he confronts Sweet Tooth with guns in each of his 4 arms, and surrounds their tower with even more intergalactic space police to take them down after all the space crimes they somehow committed. It's utter madness all the way around and a joy to watch. Melvin and the rest of Sweet Tooth's clones pull out guns and are ready to die to defend their leader. This is one of my favorite endings in the game, and it's far from being objectively good. It's just insane. Quattro delivers the classic line, and then it ends. It's fantastic. This is one where Head On didn't even bother to try to continue the story of Thumper's previous appearances, and instead opted to create a brand new character, who just happens to drive a similar stylish pink lowrider. The driver here is Angel, and she's accompanied by her tiny dog. She is basically a knockoff Paris Hilton, and her wish is to have the biggest, bounciest, and most powerful car ever created. She wants the world to crumble under the weight of her Basequake sub. She gets her wish, and she obnoxiously cranks the tunes during her jaunt around town, and the sheer force of the sound causes a building to collapse and fall onto the car. It's a classic setup and twist that Twisted Metal is known for, but lacks the fun or charm of the ones that we'll get to further down the list. Angel is a unique character for sure, but one that is annoying in a boring way. The least she can do is be interesting in how annoying she is.
Congratulations, little lady. You've won.
Yo. Excuse me? Who do you think you're talking to? You better show some respect or you're gonna be sorry. You know you best put those down before you get hurt.
Back to Twisted Metal 4 with another one of its one-dimensional characters. This one can be described in 2 words: hates bugs. That's it. That's his whole deal. When he earns his audience with Sweet Tooth, he wishes to have all the bugs in the world put into one spot so that he can eliminate them all at once. A stupid wish because it's immediately twisted to mean that every bug is teleported inside of his body, where they presumably eat his insides or fucking whatever. It's brutal. It feels contrived though, because that could have only happened if he asked for his wish in that very specific way, that all the bugs be put into one place. I think a better and more clever option would have been to wish for all the bugs to vanish from existence, but the twist is that the bugs are so vitally important to the environment and the world in ways that we don't always realize that it causes some sort of apocalypse. That would feel less forced and more interesting, but instead we're stuck with this. And here we are, our very first Twisted Metal 2 ending. which just goes to show how great that game really was in terms of its stories. But this is definitely the worst of them though. It makes sense that Sweet Tooth as an unlockable character would feature a lackluster ending. He's an insane escape circus clown, and his wish is exactly what you would expect an insane escape circus clown to wish for: to become a bug in an old woman's garden, where he can torment the other critters and long for the day that he returns to the human world. I get it, the ending is not supposed to make sense, it's trying to show just how unhinged Sweet Tooth is, but that doesn't make it a better ending. And here we have the first Twisted Metal 2012 ending, and it's easily the worst of the three characters in my opinion, especially when you compare this version of Dollface to the one that appears in Twisted Metal Black, which we'll get to later. Dollface here is a supermodel obsessed with reaching the top. She seeks fame by any means necessary. She's willing to sleep with photographers, sabotage her competition, and even have a sketchy back alley doctor strap a magical mask to her face to remove a scar if it means getting closer to her goals. Her wish reflects that when she declines to have the mask removed and instead asks that she be put on a rocket ship straight to the top of the supermodel world. She wishes to be put on the biggest runway so that she can shine. It turns out to be a literal airport runway where a landing plane strikes her. It's so dumb. Like, she could have just moved several feet in any direction that wasn't forward or backward and be fine. Her heel breaks and she falls, which is fitting and ironic for her as she did the same thing to another model, but overall it's just dumb as hell. We saw earlier in this list how Twisted Metal 3 decided to take a crack at continuing Axel's journey after TM2, where it chose to put him back in the wheels so that he could become one complete machine. In Head On, they took a crack at that for themselves, and once again had him step back into the wheels, but gave him the ability to come and go as he pleases, as a doctor scientist named Zemu created metal arms and legs for Axel that he can use to access his wheels at will. Zemu did this in exchange for Axel's wish should he win the tournament. But when it came time to make that wish, Axel denied him and makes clear that he can't stand idly by while the world is destroyed by Calypso in the contest. Zemu interrupts Axel as he wishes for peace, and the zap caused him to sound like he said pizza, and so there's pizza. For me, what really sells this ending is the absurdity of the way it's played out, and also just how Axel enters the rooftop to claim his prize. He gracefully floats down like he's descending from heaven, only to end up with a fucking pizza pie. It's stupid but hilarious. This is one ending that is weak for the most part, but is saved by one or two small things that go a long way for me. Warthog in Twisted Metal Black is driven by a man named Cage, who wants to be a notorious serial killer, but has this problem where he gets sad when he takes a life. He enters the contest with hopes that Calypso can remove the part of his brain that makes him feel remorse for the monstrous things he wants to do. Calypso not only altered his brain to allow him to be a better killer, but he also set him up with a new pair of scissor hands. Neat. It doesn't exactly have the depth or substance of the other Twisted Metal Black characters or stories, but it does have this, a voice actor who crushes the role.
He didn't just operate on my head. He gave me a new pair of hands. They would become my trademark. When I killed, everyone would know it was me.
The performance of Cage is chilling. He sells the characters so well as this horrifying psychopath who is genuinely delighted to have his scissor hands, calling them his signature. If this ending was done by a lesser voice actor, it would probably be bottom tier, but man is it creepy as hell. And now we have the first of the small brawl endings, which does say a lot about the overall quality of them. But you'll also notice that most of them are bunched up around here in the middle, and I don't have all that much to say about them. They're all just really solid but not spectacular, just good wholesome fun like a Saturday morning cartoon. Hammerhead wants to be a rock star and ends up at the head of a boy band, much to his dismay. Like I said, solid.
The driver of Thumper stood before me. As his prize for winning Twisted Metal, he asked for his greatest wish. I want to rule the world, he told me. I want to be in charge of it all. I want to be king of the earth. I explained that as winner, his ultimate wish would be granted. Your wish is granted, driver. But the world had been reduced to rubble during the Twisted Metal contest. There was nothing, no one left to rule over. He was king of the earth, but was all alone, and remains alone to this day, sitting on his throne, screaming out orders to lifeless subjects. I am Calypso, And I thank you for playing Twisted Metal.
It'll be a running theme with these middle tier endings that they are mostly made up of stories or movies that are otherwise unremarkable, save for one amazing thing. In this case, we have Captain Grimm, a pirate skeleton who challenges Sweet Tooth to a sword duel, where the winner gets the soul of the first one dead. Grimm doesn't actually speak, he gives that honor to the parrot sitting on its shoulder. The sword battle commences, and it leaves Grimm as the loser, and his parrot to perish. The specific wording of the wish implies that the parrot was the first to die, and therefore his soul is claimed by Sweet Tooth. Plus, Grimm is already dead, so good luck killing him and taking his soul. The main selling point of this ending is the absolute perfection of the camera work. It's presented like an 8-year-old who just watched an anime for the first time playing with action figures. They fly at each other with swords waving, and with a single swipe, the fight is over. The camera spins around them dramatically the whole time. It's incredible. It's so cheesy and weird, I love it. Continuing on the flawed but beautiful endings is Microblast, a leprechaun whose desperation is matched only by his insecurity. He hates that he's small and uses his victory wish to ask that he be made 50 feet tall, so that he may scrape the skies and crush all that have laughed at him. During this rampage, he's brought to a halt as his body is turned to stone. He has become a statue, and a lesson in accepting and loving yourself for who you are. What does it for me in this ending is how Melvin just unloads a barrage of height-based puns onto poor Microblast.
Microblast, you've shown an enormous capacity for succeeding, leaving not a small trace of doubt in the mind of any spectator of the tournament that you are largely, by a giant margin, the biggest champion of the Twisted Metal competitions.
Arrgh! Enough! I've come here for me wish.
Microblast, it is not our intent to belittle you.
I'm not one to feel okay with making fun of someone for things that are outside of their control, especially as someone like me who is well below 6 feet tall. But it's hilarious that Melvin is the one dishing out the insults when he himself is the size of a toddler. It's a fun ending, but it's not good. Another small brawl entry, another really solid ending where I don't have much to say about it. The Thumper duo want a bangin' sound system to jam to all their favorite ditties to, and they get one so powerful it blows them miles away and destroys their eardrums. Good, lighthearted fun for everyone. I'm putting these Spectre endings from Twisted Metal 1 back to back because they are largely the same, but with one huge change that I feel separates them enough to merit their own entries on the list. Spectre is driven by a literal ghost, a soul condemned to wander the earth in search of his next step. This somehow led him to the Twisted Metal tournament, and when he wins, his wish is simple. He wants to be resurrected, to assume the human form once again. Calypso's powers are nearly limitless, and he has no hesitation in granting Spectre's wish. In the text ending, Spectre is made alive again, and is allowed to leave with no strings attached. He's not a slave to Calypso or possessed by some malevolent spirit using his body as a host for wicked deeds. He just gets to return to his family and have a happy ending. It's touching. In the live-action ending, as soon as Spectre can feel his spirit merge back with his physical form, Calypso just fucking shoots him right then and there, shouting, "I giveth and I taketh away." Like it's not even a twist or clever in any way. He just unloads hot lead into this dude for no reason. It's kind of hilarious, but a real asshole move by Calypso. I prefer the text ending because it's heartwarming, something that Twisted Metal is not known for being. Pizza Boy I think embodies better than any other character the brilliance of TM4's endings. Not that any of them are going to win any awards or anything, but he shows us that entertainment comes in many forms, and being objectively good is not a requirement for any of those forms. Pizza Boy is another character whose entire identity can be summed up by their occupation, but he has the added trait of speaking like if Eminem treated the English language like a loose set of rules that are made to be broken.
Oh yeah, and it's gonna be quick. So quick I bounce without my shadow and all that. I think something can be arranged.
P-Boy's word salad ends with him asking Sweet Tooth for the sickest, most tricked out ride ever made, and the first thing he does is challenge Drag Queen to a drag race, where he finds out that his car is so beefed up that it takes flight and achieves escape velocity. After breaking the surly bonds of Earth, he is immediately swallowed up by a black hole. Melvin chortles on about looking for potholes when he should have been looking for black holes. It's so bad, it's great. Pizza Boy's delivery, his awkward animations, the way he goes to fucking outer space, it's all just the best. Well done, TM4. Good old Chucky Floop, a 19-year-old kid down on his luck and searching for a win anywhere in his life. He's a certified loser who seems completely incapable of doing anything worthwhile. Until one day, he calls into a radio show, and to his surprise, he actually won something. An entry into the Twisted Metal contest and a car to use in it. Chucky parlays that radio show prize into a full-on raging victory at Twisted Metal. As a man who has felt completely forgotten, overlooked, and left behind by the world, he wishes for the only thing he can think to make sure that people pay attention to him and recognize his existence. Money. So much money, in fact, that he is buried under a mountain of it. It's a classic monkey paw punchline for someone who's driven by greed. You want to be filthy rich? Sure, have a whole carton of filthy rich. See how you like it. It's simple but elegant, and the way Chucky's insecurities come through and how he's presented is a treat.
Okay, winner, right? Big time. Not a loser. Winner.
It's okay, Chucky.
It's a great ending. Of all the endings where Calypso gets bested by the contestants, this one might be the funniest, with one or two exceptions later on. Crimson Fury is this kid James Bond and wants to take down Calypso's empire by using a single water gun spray. He riles up the cat sitting in Calypso's lap and it completely destroys little Billy. These Small Brawl endings are simple but just so delightful. I'm going to do something a little bit different here for Outlaw and include each of their endings from Twisted Metal 1, 2, and Head On as one entry, because it's the closest thing the series has to a canon winner, and the endings from Twisted 2 and Head On are only good in the context of how they connect to the other games, since it's one continuous story. The first game sees Carl Roberts, your standard, everyday, garden variety policeman, and he wants to end Twisted Metal for good, by participating in it and wreaking havoc across the streets he swore to protect. When he finally gets to Calypso, his wish is simple: a world without Twisted Metal, which sounds a lot like Sony. Calypso gets all dramatic and drops this monologue.
On this night, December 24th, 2005, Officer Carl Roberts is granted a world free of the high-octane competition.
Outlaw steps out into this new world only to find that it's just outer space, a world devoid of everything, including Twisted Metal. TM2 picks up right where that left off, with the sister of Carl Roberts, Jamie, taking control of Outlaw 2, and when she wins, she asks that she be sent to wherever her brother has been, which again is outer space. But Jamie was prepared for Calypso's tricks and outfitted her police car with fucking rockets so that she and her brother can fly back to Earth and get their revenge on Calypso, and finally end Twisted Metal. I don't know how Carl Roberts survived for 1 minute, unprotected in space, let alone an entire year, with only a scruffy beard to show for it. Following that, and Head On, the sibling cop duo joined forces to take down Calypso, but they completely fumbled the ball. They didn't rehearse at all how they would handle the situation if they actually won the contest for a third time, and just argued until one of them accidentally said,
I wish you'd just shut up!
It's sort of an unsatisfying conclusion to this epic 3-part Outlaw saga, but it gets bonus points for keeping the story going better than anyone else. The first game's ending was clever in its twist, and Outlaw 2 has a neat way of countering the obvious twist, but for Head On to pay it off in such an underwhelming way is why this doesn't go higher on the list. This ending was ahead of its time. A kid obsessed with Halloween wants to go to a world where it's Halloween every day, predating the modern obsession of spooky season by at least a decade. Oh, actually, turns out there's a movie called Halloween Town that follows a very similar premise, and it's from the 90s. Oh, shoot. Either way, it's good fun. Jeez, I really don't have much to say about these Small Brawl endings. They're just good. Okay, hear me out here. I know most people would have tucked this one away in the cellar of the ranking because it's a stupid wish, but I think it's fucking hilarious. This cranky old geezer hops into her Jeep to get the neighborhood to shut up so she can watch TV in peace. Calypso's like, oh shit dog, you like TV? Okay, yeah, here you go. And just fucking clockwork oranges her, forcing her unblinking eyes to watch some infomercial forever or whatever. This ending is a highlight of TM3 for me. Just amazing. So dumb. This one is no fuss, just a bony-armed skeleton man riding a motorcycle and demanding the eternal soul of a powerful trickster god, and succeeding. Grim is easily the most badass character in any of the games he appears in, which is all of them. But to see him brought to life in this live-action movie is just amazing. The way his outstretched bone arm looks as he points to Calypso is unintentional comedy gold. I'm sort of bundling this ending with Warthogs because they are basically the same thing. A kid with a police or military affectation wants to destroy Billy Calypso with some manner of explosives, and both fail hilariously. In Outlaw's case, it leads to him accidentally blowing up a real cop car, and Warthog is tricked into some Looney Tunes BS by shooting a cardboard cutout of Calypso. That leads to even more explosives. Both are the sort of whimsical cartoon fun that makes Small Brawl so charming, and I'll give Warthog the slight edge for his ridiculous tank costume. I'm sure there are a handful of people who would put John Doe much higher on this list, but I consider his ending to be one of the weaker ones from Twisted Metal Black, which is to say that it's still extremely good and well executed, it just doesn't quite reach the same heights of the other characters in the game. John Doe is the amnesiac FBI agent undercover inside a terror organization, whose good deed did not go unpunished, as his act of heroism was rewarded with him losing everything. His identity, his memory, and eventually his life. He doesn't want revenge or to spread the dark disease, just to remember who he is and to have his life back, but ends up as the plaything of Calypso, who took this man who has no identity and led him to compete in Twisted Metal with the prize of learning who he was, only to end up with him losing his life, just as he remembered who he is. This is easily one of the most creative and unique stories in the game, and it's told incredibly well, but the ending is a bummer and there's just not much more to it. Boomhauer on a four-wheeler. I don't think I need to explain further, but just in case I will. ATV and Head On is ridden by Gene Ruddish, a self-proclaimed ladies' man who believes that all he needs for women to realize that is for him to ask a trickster god to convince them with the monkey paw magic. He talks like he has some vendetta against the human language.
Dang old man Calypso, get me on some old desire. We're gonna be on dang old dutting on moves on man, gonna say bow bow.
He wants Calypso to transform him from simple loser to irresistible sex god. So irresistible that he ends up drowning in a veritable sea of horniness, and is the first recorded death by Snoo Snoo in all of Twisted Metal. No matter how dumb this is, it's just pure joy. Let's keep the sexy train rolling here with Hammerhead from TM1, where in their live-action version, they find out that their prize for winning is a wish, and it takes them like 0.69 seconds to ask for babes.
We want babes! Yeah!
Done!
And with the snap of a finger, all of the women surrounding Calypso in this dank underground parking garage go to join Dave and Mike in their truck. There is some level of objectifying women here, but come on, it's just dumb fun. It's a 90s video game. This is a wonderful adaptation of the Twister character to the kid-friendly world of Small Brawl. She's still a speed-obsessed girl who wants to use her wish to go faster than anyone has gone before, and ends up attached to the warhead of a missile preparing for launch. She's sent into orbit never to be seen or heard from again. It's charming, lighthearted fun that Twisted Metal Small Brawl nails every time. Great ending. This ending only makes sense if you are aware of the Twisted Metal 2 comic book, because seeing this massive demon driving a tank just absolutely dunk Calypso into the underworld seems like utter nonsense unless you know the history that Minion and Calypso share. Perhaps it is cheating to judge this ending based on outside considerations, but again, I believe that art should be evaluated not only for its own merits, but also the context that it exists in and around. Plus, there are a few endings more badass than this. I'm giving this one a lot of points for just being an absolute classic ending. It's iconic. There's not much to it, it's just a simple setup and punchline where this bag of bones soldier dude is wanting to find the Fountain of Youth, but his head got left out. It's just straight into my veins, please. This is one of the more ambitious ones from TM1. You can tell they were feeling themselves a bit when it came to Captain Spears, as I'm pretty sure this is the only ending that features a scene that takes place outside of Calypso's underground lair. He's a tortured former commander whose men were lost during the South American Wars, and he believes that it's his fault, that if only he can go back in time, he can save them. His wish is granted, and he finds himself back in the lush jungles where it all went down. He grabs his radio and urges his men to stay out of the danger zone. They do, and their lives are saved. But just as he turns to go meet them, an enemy soldier spots him and takes him out. It's a heartbreaking ending and believable twist. It's just a shame that with every game outside of Twisted Metal Black, there isn't anything leading up to the endings. I would have liked to see more of this story. The payoff would be much better if there was more substance than just a short cutscene. But still, it's well done. It's such a dumb joke, but it fits so well, and at least it's an actual joke. A demon from hell, one powerful enough to earn its way to be a middle-level boss in the prestigious Twisted Metal tournament, wants one thing from Calypso. He's paid his dues to the trickster god and would simply like to just return to hell where he is meant to be. Instead, Calypso sends him to Hell, Michigan, where he can sit in agony and silence for eternity. It's hilarious. Now, does it undo some of the established lore between Minion and Calypso? Sure, I guess, but this is Twisted Metal. The games are incapable of holding a consistent lore. It's just a solid joke, and I don't care what you say. Billy Ray is a broken-hearted farmer of simple, haunted disposition, disfigured and mentally shattered by a cheating wife and the crop-dusting pilot who conspired to leave him in his own field, to wither with his crops in a cloud of poison. Surviving the attack, he finds his unfaithful wife celebrating with the pilot, and Billy Ray takes revenge on the spot, killing his wife, but not before the pilot can escape, leading Billy to enter the Twisted Metal competition to get his prize of revenge on the pilot. It's a fairly straightforward vengeance plot where Billy Ray is willing to tear apart everything in his way to find the pilot who took everything from him, but being simple is not always a fault. It just helps make clear his intentions, which makes his actions believable. Like many of the stories and endings in Twisted Metal Black, Billy Ray's character speaks to the corruption of the human mind when faced with a dark disease, and the horrors of humanity. I like it. Fight me. You've probably noticed that I give a lot of credit to endings that are able to expand or draw attention to the larger narrative of Twisted Metal. Endings that help build the world and lore of the tournament and make you question what you think you know about these games. And Yellow Jacket and Twisted Metal is a great example of that. The iconic yellow taxicab is driven by the zombified body of Charlie Kane, who is Sweet Tooth's father, and was slain in cold blood. Charlie is being controlled by his other son, this unnamed kid who was a mechanical savant, and rigged him to be controlled via remote. Charlie Kane and son enter Twisted Metal in hopes that a victory will give them a chance to live together happily without the judging eyes of others. The ending gets a little crazy. The kid gets his audience with Calypso, who immediately destroys the remote controlling Charlie, killing him permanently. Calypso swipes the kid and explains to him that he needs someone to take over the contest when he retires. Sweet Tooth was his first choice, but as a result of Yellow Jacket winning, his brother, the child, is the next best option, as violence is just in their blood. It also makes you wonder what Calypso would have done if both Sweet Tooth and Yellow Jacket lose the tournament, which is the case when anyone else wins. Anyways, it's a cool ending and offers some interesting food for thought about the series. This one sort of follows the same beats as Spectre's ending from Twisted Metal 1, but with some of the details changed a bit that I would argue make it way cooler. Mr. Grimm is tired of being the Dark Collector and wants to pass the scythe on to someone else. He just can't keep up with his addiction to eating souls. Calypso gives the duty to a little girl just walking the street near them, and Grimm is returned to human form. Excited, he begins to run and within seconds is crushed by a passing truck. The new Grimm collects his soul and it fades to black. It's a rough go for Grimm to be human for like 1.5 seconds, but what sells this ending is the overall quality and execution. It's outstanding. The setup is interesting, with the Grim Reaper wanting to hang up his robe. The twist is decent, but also just the vibe of Grimm making his entrance is on point. Dude just drops off a building and lands on the street below like a fucking comic book hero. And eats some souls. Grimm does not give a shit. Billy Calypso gets a porta potty dropped on his head. What else do you need to know? Crimson Fury in Head On is one of the few times that a driver has successfully taken down Calypso, and he does so with poise and professionalism, as he fends off the pleasures of the flesh with Calypso's women tempting him into letting go of his mission. He doesn't budge and uses his FBI connections to arrest the big man himself. It's a straightforward kick-ass ending. This ending is the first time that I can think of where the relationship between Needles and Marcus Kane is explicitly shown to be a split personality situation.
Twisted Metal is as real as you want it to be. And apparently you want it to be very real. Needles.
The ending is more about implying a deeper narrative than it does actually presenting one, but even then I do appreciate the space it gives you to think about what it is and what it could mean for the larger world of Twisted Metal. Marcus Kane suffers from nightmares about the destruction and violence of the contest, and is competing to make it stop and return to his normal life. Calypso agrees and off he goes. He wakes up in his bed and his transition to Sweet Tooth is shown. Just like the Marcus Kane ending we just talked about, this is another example of an ending where the heavy lifting comes from the implications it has for the larger story. It feels like it is actually pushing the narrative forward, whatever little narrative there is. This is the only ending in Twisted Metal 4 that does anything with the events of the intro movie, which is good because it doesn't completely mess it up. Calypso wants to take back his tournament from Sweet Tooth, who stole it from him. There's a ring that's the source of their power, and a battle erupts over who has control over it. Tooth and Calypso gently sway back and forth while Melvin yells at them. It checks a lot of boxes for me. It's cheesy as hell in the most entertaining way. It actually has some meat to the story bone, and you can tell how much effort they put into it compared to some of the other endings in that game.
Stop! Stop! You'll destroy us all! The souls are escaping!
You may notice that there are going to be a handful of TM1 endings that get a lot of praise just for being so unapologetically campy and ridiculous. The performances from every actor are priceless. The props they used are just as bonkers, and the stories are impossible to make sense of. Darkseid is one of my favorites of those, and it all has to do with how they dressed up a real person as this thing, and then sucked him into a Folgers coffee tin while Calypso freaks out. It's beyond perfect. If I'm not mistaken, this might be the only ending in all of Small Brawl that connects it to the rest of the series in terms of characters or lore. It's heartwarming to see this little kid Spectre, a shy boy who just wants answers about his missing father. He ends up with a locket that has a picture of Ken Masters, the driver of Spectre from Twisted Metal 2. It's a nice touch and a way to bring the games together in some way. It's even better that the little kid gets the key to the actual Spectre to go along with that locket, which is probably unsafe, but hey, who cares? Speaking of Spectre from TM2, this one is a certified classic. This is one of the most memorable endings in all of Twisted Metal. Anyone who even has a passing knowledge of this series and its signature humor will know of this ending. A man wants the world to know his face, and so his face is made the size of the world and stretched across the sky. I like the delivery of Ken Masters' lines, just a real Chadley fellow who you root to have this Looney Tunes BS happen to.
I'm an actor, and I'm really, really good, and I've been struggling, searching for my big break for over 6 weeks. Please, Calypso, you've got to make me famous. Make it so the entire world knows my face.
No complaints here. Great ending. I really appreciate this ending because it's the only way that Sweet Tooth could be translated into the realm of children. He's portrayed as a troublemaker who gets into some cartoony, violent antics, stealing an ice cream truck and starts a 5-star GTA police chase. And like all the other Small Brawl endings, I don't have much to say other than, wow, good. There are so many Twisted Metal 2 endings that are just so undeniably classic and iconic. There's just an elegance to how they handle these movies. The animations are inspired and brilliantly stylized. And such a great example of that is Twisters here, where Amanda Watts uses her wish to get the chance to go faster than anyone ever has before, to crest the barrier that has eluded man forever, the light speed barrier. Doing so sends her back in time, and we see her trek across time periods such as the Old West, the pirate times, and eventually the Dino days, where she's crushed by a T-Rex. It's so out there and a total delight to behold. If only more things could be like this, just simple, lighthearted fun. As I go through these endings, I see more and more how much of these TM4 endings are really just sort of underrated in an interesting way. The writing is usually abysmal, but it's clear the team who made them were at least not afraid to put effort into it. The execution of each one feels inspired, even if that doesn't lead to something you would call good. However, Orbital is one that the premise and execution were both excellent compared to the others. The James Bond knockoff is a secret agent who had his face horribly burned during a mission gone wrong. One half of his head is normal while the other is a terrifying skull monster. After winning the tourney, he wishes that his face be made normal again, that he no longer be the only man on Earth with only half a face. Sweet Tooth snaps his finger or whatever, and Orbital returns to work, only to find that everyone around him is now afflicted with the same half-face problem that he has. His wish was granted. He was made normal. But the new normal is for everyone to be like him, not the other way around. That's a legitimately clever twist. This is Twilight Zone levels of setup and punchline. One of the many hillbilly characters featured in Head On, this one being a monster truck pilot named Catfish, whose fingers and teeth are in constant battle for which one he has less of. He's a skilled hunter who's landed trophies of every game imaginable, but he has yet to take down the most dangerous one, man. His wish is to challenge Calypso to a 1v1 on Rust, quickscopes only. He got murked right away and sent back to the lobby with his head mounted on Calypso's wall.
Let's tie this butte to the hood and head on outta here.
This is easily one of the best TM4 endings. This Jones's family are complete loser goons who risked everything in their stupid station wagon just to ask a circus clown for a fancy RV, with a number of add-ons, including forcing that circus clown to be their personal driver. And they annoy him so much that he decides it to be a better fate to careen the RV off a cliff than to deal with him for any amount of time. Comedy gold. Mr. Grimm has seen his fair share of different versions, and this is one of the more difficult ones for me to rate. On one hand, it's not nearly as badass as the supernatural Grim Reaper stuff from most games, but on the other, it's still a unique take on the skull-based motorcycle man. The ending itself is better than I think most people would give it credit for. Grimm is a man who feels his life went off the rails when his father died during one of his stunts. Grimm wants to go back in time to when his life made sense, when his father was alive. So that's what he wishes for. He wants to save his father by making him not do that stunt. Calypso teleports Grimm to the truck that him and his father were driving in, and the look on Grimm's face is why this is so high for me. The expression that shows the weight of him realizing what he once had and what could have been before his life fell apart. You can see the longing. Grimm's dad sees this grown-ass man who just popped into their truck and freaks out, causing them to crash, killing his father anyway. Following that, the young Grimm kills the older one. Time travel is often a recipe for dumb shit narratives, but this is one that I actually really enjoy. It's a devastating ending, especially when you see on Grimm's face just how much it meant to him to be back in that place with his father, even for just a moment. It's really surprising how many of these endings in Small Brawl end up with Calypso getting just annihilated by these kids. And this one's probably my favorite of those. Mortimer had his frog stolen from him in the opening movie of the game, and he gets his revenge in a way that even he didn't see coming. His frog was somehow exposed to radioactive waste and got mutated into a horrific monster that eats Billy Calypso. Score 1 for the nerdy fella. It should be no surprise, based on how I've talked about Twisted Metal Black here on this channel, that it's my favorite game in the series, and its characters are no different to me. They easily have the most depth and substance to them, and invite you to think about and consider them more than any other. And Spectre is a great example of that, where on its surface, it's easy to dismiss this ending as being another nonsensical Calypso being a douche moment. But I think it makes perfect sense based on what we know about BM throughout her intro and middle cutscenes and the loading screens. She's a woman who spent her whole life having her perception of herself and the world around her distorted by abuse and toxic lessons. Her father was a real piece of shit, and she felt like she was stuck on the outside of love and affection from any direction it could come from, as her friends seem to have no trouble finding partners and getting married, while she remains alone and unloved. She finally snapped completely when her friend threw the traditional bouquet. Her distorted mind is like reverse alchemy, taking what's bright and golden and converting it into ash and evil. For her wish, all she wants is a man that will love her. Calypso presents her with a man whose brain he surgically altered, and even he can't bring himself to love BM.
I will never love you.
So she clubs him to death. It may seem like Calypso didn't hold up his end of the bargain, but I think he did. Her true love is to inflict violence, to kill. Great ending. Much like the Spectre ending from TM2, this one is a certified classic. If there was a Hall of Fame of Twisted Metal endings, this is in it. In fact, it kind of is, as the middle cutscene for Grimm in Twisted Metal 2012 shows Calypso's trophy case where the bricks used for Simon's tower are on display. There's such a charm to these endings in Twisted Metal 2, this one especially. Simon is such an over-exaggerated goofball who's so overwhelmed by hubris that his literal downfall becomes a satisfying punchline. Nothing to say about this one. It might be the shortest ending in the series, but that's because it's efficient. It gets down to business and gets out of there. Grimm wants Calypso's soul and gets stepped on. Great pun, fight me. There is something deeply funny about the character of Cousin Eddie. He's an overgrown hillbilly with the mind of a third grader and the strength of 30 men. He somehow built an RV from scratch and coerced an army of boomhauers to fight alongside him. The laughs don't end there though. His ending sees Cousin Eddie completing the tournament, approaching Calypso, and reveals that he was not even aware of the contest taking place. He just followed the sound of explosions and thought it looked fun. When he finds out that he's the winner, he He becomes the first person to successfully threaten Calypso with force and gets himself a new RV. I don't know, man, it's just hilarious all the way around. There are some endings in Twisted Metal 4 that are just sneaky really good, and this one being my favorite. The setup is utter absurdity. Meter Maid entered the tournament with the sole purpose of serving a mountain of parking tickets to Sweet Tooth, and forces him and the rest of his clownies to sit through traffic school. It's out of nowhere completely, but to me shows the brilliance of Twisted Metal endings. They're at their best in the PS1 games when they just have fun with it, and don't worry about being too silly if it means the joke is solid. TM3 just goes for lackluster silly, while Twisted Metal 4 is willing to get weird and wacky with a purpose, and this ending shows that. This was such an original take on the Grim Reaper. A figure that is always depicted as being mysterious or devoid of humanity is presented as a flawed being whose addiction to souls has gotten out of his bony hands. He doesn't wish to be rid of his insatiable hunger and have his addiction lifted. He wishes to have the souls fed to him by a fire hose. Calypso sends the world into a global brawl to make more souls to eat. Eventually, there are no more people left and Grim is left to starve, making this one of the best, most interesting endings from Twisted Metal 2. And now we arrive at the last ending from Twisted Metal 2012. With this one, I'll include the bonus movies that show after the credits of the game, because they do revolve heavily around Sweet Tooth. Starting with his main movie, he wants to find the only one of his victims that was able to escape his wrath, his daughter. He demands that Calypso be sent to where she's been hiding all these years. Turns out she's been dead the whole time, and Sweet Tooth is teleported to inside the coffin she's buried in, and he's stuck there until he dies. It's a legitimately great twist that I didn't expect the first time I played. It's dark, brutal, and exactly the kind of thing you would expect from Twisted Metal after Twisted Metal Black. In addition to that, there's also a couple extra movies where we see Calypso visit the same grave and resurrect Sweet Tooth's daughter to be his servant. She's known as Sweet Chick. After that, we see Charlie Kane, Sweet Tooth's son, who is revealed to have been spared so that he can continue his father's work should he perish. Both of the extra endings imply a larger story that would probably be explored in a sequel that obviously never came, but are cool as hell nonetheless. No Face is fantastic. He was a boxer who got torn up by an out-of-town fighter. In rough shape, he was brought to a doctor who lost money on the fight, and the doctor decided to pay him back for his efforts by permanently disfiguring Frank. Now he seeks revenge. When boiled down, the story is a simple revenge narrative, but it's a creative premise, and No Face has so much character and charm that it's hard not to enjoy.
After all these years, you still got some snap in that left hook of mine.
Here's another ending that I enjoy despite not having any clue what's going on. The relationship between Calypso and his daughter Krista is unexplored territory for the franchise, but what little we do see of them is often some of the most interesting moments the series has. In Head On, the ghost of Krista takes control of Grasshopper and competes in her father's tournament, and when she wins, she wishes that the car accident that killed them never happened. Calypso says it's not that simple and that her mind wouldn't be able to comprehend why. She presses him further and he does something. I'm not really sure what. We see Krista have dreams of her childhood where Calypso is playing with her and having a great time. Then it shows her in the hospital in a coma that she apparently has been in for years. Calypso stands over her and then leaves. I don't understand it, but it's super intriguing. Did Calypso not do what she asked and just put her in a coma where she imagines that he did? Could he not do it because if that accident never happened, he wouldn't have the powers that let him do the things he can do? I mean, that's what the Twisted Metal 2 comic book would suggest. You can disagree with me, but I will give it credit for having the feeling of suggesting a larger story, even if it doesn't actually have much narrative substance. Disagree with me if you must. This is entirely held up by Charlie Kane's legendary performance.
Sounds good to me, baby!
To me, this ending is an example of the tone that works best for Twisted Metal. Sweet Tooth here is a maniacal cartoon character who is completely detached when it comes to the violence he inflicts, while also being playful and witty. It's dark but not upsetting. It's humorous but not stupid, striking that same balance that made Twisted Metal 2 so special with its movies. Sweet Tooth bursts into Calypso's compound, running over his guards. He references all the times him and Calypso have gone back and forth throughout the series, before the game takes its own swing at the story from Twisted Metal 4, by having Calypso and Sweet Tooth trade places. They switch bodies, and Sweet Tooth has Calypso killed by his own guards. It's definitely among my favorite of the head-on endings. This is where the legend of Mortimer and Shadow begins. He was one of the first characters in the series to successfully get one over on Calypso. He was hired by the souls of the victims of Twisted Metal to bring about their vengeance on Calypso. With a simple setup, it would have been perfectly fine to just have them devour Calypso and move on, but instead they went with him having been carried off on a magic carpet ride and dropped off on a passing plane, where he scares the shit out of its passengers. It's just so good. I paired this with the Sweet Tooth ending from Head On because they both embody the vibe of Twisted Metal when it's at its best. Dark, playful, and unafraid to be a little bit out there. Agent Stone, Blood of Blue, and Heart of Gold. This ending feels like they wanted to redo the story of Roadkill from Twisted Metal 1, but make it even better. This man is torn at his seams and unable to come to terms with a terrible mistake he made while on duty. Agent Stone was a police sniper who prided himself on his ability to not only hit his targets, but also know which targets to hit and when. One night, he came across a criminal group that he's been wanting to dismantle for months. When he got the green light to take them out, he was overcome with rage and just started shooting, with no regard for what he hit. This led to him accidentally taking out a family who were taken hostage by the criminal group. He wants to go back to that night where he made that grave error and do it all over again. When he does, he makes sure that every shot hits its mark. The family was saved and the bad guys were removed. He did it, or so he thought. One of the men he thought he killed was still alive and somehow was able to pull out a pistol and shoot Agent Stone from like a mile away. It's ridiculous on its face, but I think it works for the ending. Agent Stone finds that the only way to transact the undoing of his grave error is to trade his own life for the ones he took, which for a man of good intentions in that world is the only freedom he can find. So it worked out for him. It's a great story told in a great way. I cannot say enough good things about this one. This is pure, uncut, distilled TM2 ending, and it's wonderful. Two goofballs manage to win the tournament and debate what they should wish for, before ending up wanting the ability to fly. Before they even consider what Calypso did with his powers, they just fucking leap from the skyscraper, and turns out all they won was a couple of first-class plane tickets. It's a brilliant setup and punchline. This ending is everything I said about Yellow Jacket from TM1, but doubly so. Sweet Tooth's actor, who is the same actor as Yellow Jacket, killed it in the most unintentionally hilarious way. This is the kind of insanity that I like about the early versions of Sweet Tooth. This has way more personality and charm than him just turning into a bug like in TM2. It's so iconic, it even got heavily referenced in the TV show on Peacock, where Crazy Harold the Wacky Lunch Shack has a prominent role. This may very well be the most adorable ending in all of Twisted Metal. Mortimer is an undead man whose burial plot was disturbed by some teenage ruffians, and all he wants to do is return to his rest. Calypso seems to have a genuine care for Mortimer and treats him like a friend.
I'm so very, very tired.
I'm not surprised. You shouldn't be awake. Tell me, what disturbed your slumber?
Even tucking him in and reading him a bedtime story to get him to go back to sleep. Mortimer gets a teddy bear. I mean, seriously, find a more adorable ending. I'll wait. I'm not saying that Twisted Metal actually has some deep or profound narrative that sits just below the surface of the car combat action, but there are some truly interesting and thought-provoking stories throughout the series. Marcus Kane is a man who is called crazy and unhinged in his world, but he's the only one that sees through the lies. He knows this world is not real and wants to escape. Calypso congratulates him on being the first to realize this and sends him back to the quote-unquote real world, where he wakes up in a hospital room surrounded by the people he was just fighting in the tournament. The doctor tells him that he's the first to wake up after they were all involved in a multi-car pileup. Calypso face pops in with fire in his eyes, implying that this is not what it seems. It's a real mindfuck, and adds a ton of compelling food for thought about Twisted Metal's world and lore. So let's keep the mindfucks rolling with this ending that sees Marcus and Needles Kane finally coming face to face in some ethereal world outside of reality. This is the first and only time in the series where Marcus interacts directly with his alter ego, or is even aware that he has one. Sweet Tooth seems to be familiar with this place, but doesn't feel like explaining much to Marcus. They stumble upon Tower Tooth, the final boss of the game, and they climb aboard. I don't know what the hell this ending means, but it sure does inspire some interesting thoughts about the series and the meta-narrative surrounding it. I'm sure some people will disagree with me putting Grimm this high on the list. but I think he, more than any other character, represents the overall idea that Twisted Metal Black is exploring. If this game had a thesis statement, it would be this quote from his story.
They say the mind bends and twists in order to deal with the horrors of life. I think my mind bent so much it snapped in two.
Anything pure or good or brought forth with the best intentions in the Twisted Metal Black world is just a naive placeholder waiting for the dark disease to grab hold. Mr. Grimm was just a kid who happened to finish high school at the worst time. Wartime. Had he been born a few years later, he could have graduated and moved on into the wide world with his soul intact. But instead, the army drafted him and his best friend Benny to fight a ridiculous war. Sure, it is just another revenge plot, where Grimm wants to kill the man who broke his mind and forced his best friend to die. But to me, it speaks to the theme of this game so well because he could have wished for anything, even his best friend back, but he only wants revenge. He's been corrupted by the dark disease. I love this ending for the story, the presentation, and for the fact they found a way to turn Axel into a character that you care about. He's literally a man who's trapped between two massive wheels. It's an insane design, yet he feels like a real character that you root for. Put in the absurd contraption by his father over 30 years ago, all Axel wants is the strength to finally stand up to his father, to find the courage to break free and forge his own path, completely absent of the influence of others, especially his father. Winning the tournament, he is granted that wish. Where others have their wishes twisted ironically, Axel is given exactly what he asks for. He finds himself back on his father's farm and makes clear that he is no longer under the control of his father or his wheels. He rips his own arms from the machine, tearing them from the elbow up, before threatening his father and disowning him. It was never about the physical ability. At any point he could have done that. It was about empowering himself to face his abuser, his oppressor, and his greatest fears. Finally free from the bondage he has known his entire life, he shambles off into the fields, unsure of his future, but does so as a free man. And no prize is more valuable than to lift the smothering, suffocating weight of someone's control over you. It's just a shame that Axel could never reach the height of this ending in any other game in the series. Just like in the head-on ending for Grasshopper, I really enjoy the times in this series where we get to see more of Calypso's relationship to his daughter and learn more about his past. This is also one of the few times that we see any real emotion from Calypso. He seems human here, not some sociopathic trickster god. It makes for a powerful moment when he embraces his daughter, knowing that it means accepting death. Because even though she's a robot rebuilt by the LAPD to take him down, it's still his daughter. In my opinion, this is the best ending in all of Twisted Metal 2. Jebediah is an evangelist and very specifically not a real preacher.
I wasn't even a real preacher.
He believes wholeheartedly that he's the willing vessel of his God, but did a terrible thing under the influence of a demonic force and must clear his name by getting the truth out that he is not responsible for the harm he's caused. His ending reveals to him the truth that there was no demon, it was him alone, tricking himself into thinking he has nothing to be held accountable for. This story stands out to me because it speaks to how the mind is a powerful, flexible, and infinitely complex system, and that sometimes in its flexibility, the mind forgets which things are which, what is real, what is fake. It doesn't take much to trick a mind, especially when we so desperately want to be tricked. Perception creates reality just as much as reality creates perception. If you want to believe that any wrongdoing on your part was the result of some powerful entity controlling your mind and body, and that you should remain blameless for the damage you've caused, the brain knows better than to stop you. Brimstone's ending is dark, profound, and endlessly fascinating. I put Dollface this high on the list for the message that she presents. Fresh out of college, she began working for a mask maker named Mr. Creel, who turned out to be an abusive a-hole. Not knowing any better, Dollface took his abuse and anger to mean that she wasn't doing her job well enough or that it was all somehow her fault. It's not until she competes in Twisted Metal where she realizes over the course of the tournament that she was the victim of abuse and horrible circumstances. Not only that, but when her story concludes and she wins the contest, she gets her revenge on Mr. Creel and is given the key to unlock her mask, but she chooses to keep the Dollface on, claiming that it doesn't cry or look scared and will always look pretty. Her punishment is only a punishment if she allows it to be, because she now has the control over her abuser, her identity, and herself. In the face of unforgivable evil and the dark disease, she tells a story of overcoming the trauma and abuse that the dark world throws at her, and accepting the scars and using it as fuel to be better than the darkness. She wears the oppressing chains of Twisted Metal Black like armor in her battles, and remains a symbol of hope for the people of Midtown. If Grimm represents the ideas and themes that Twisted Metal Black is going for, Raven represents the antidote to the evil of that world. Deeply in tune with the dark, unknowable forces that pervade Midtown, she is able to utilize what everyone else is too afraid to even admit exists, and avenge the victims of the dark world with her haunted hearse and voodoo dolls. But she didn't arrive at that point easily. She had her best friend ripped away from her because of some school bullies going too far. Raven's quest to take revenge led her to realize that she isn't the only one in need, but she is the only one capable of providing that specific brand of help that Midtown requires. Where the dark world corrupts the light, the good, and the pure, Raven corrupts the darkness, bending it to her will and fighting back. It took losing her best friend, but Raven completed her transition from helplessly watching the horrors of Midtown and Twisted Metal Black unfold to becoming the sole warrior against it. No matter how deep chaos and evil sinks into every crack and crevice, she's the cure, the redeemer, and the closest thing to a force of good. Raven sets out to be a hero to the people of the dark world, using her voodoo dolls and haunted hearse to protect them. How could I not put this as number 1? While I don't think it's objectively the best ending in the series, but it has the benefit of being the most memorable and iconic scenes in all of Twisted Metal.
3 months in the nut house. It was the longest I'd ever been confined.
It's Sweet Tooth, come on. Even then, this is still among one of the best endings there is, and when placed in the context of the game taking place within his mind, it does get a bump for that too. Sweet Tooth is offered the chance to remove the curse of his flaming hair, but only if he stops his killing ways. If he doesn't, the curse will come back. He decides that he would rather stay a monster and bear the flames than return to normal life. He kills Calypso and sets out to be the greatest serial killer of all time. Okay, so that's every Twisted Metal ending ranked from worst to best, in my opinion. If you disagree with me, make sure to tell me how wrong and dumb I am in the comments. Otherwise, tell me what your favorite Twisted Metal ending is in the comments below. And take a moment to remember that you are worth it. Pain is a certainty in life, but suffering does not have to be. I hope you can find the things or people around you that make you happy, healthy, and kind, so that the pain of life doesn't have to mean suffering. Your darkest moments don't define you, and there's always a tomorrow. Take care out there and have a nice day.